Mark. Welcome back to the show.
I was wrong. You were right.
This show is naughty.
You're the best. I'm the worst.
Oh, my God! How could he do that?
As good as you are on that show and everything, every time you make those type of predictions, I run right to the bank and go the other way.
9 to noon.
It's a beautiful morning. I think I'll go outside for a while.
Let's smile.
And just smile.
9 to noon, and the Love Covenant, hashtag Faith Radio, is in the air. It's a Recoup the Cash Wednesday. And we head down to the beautiful state of Florida, and we welcome Frank Frangie into the mix. He's in his 11th year calling Jacksonville Jaguars football, and here's how it sounds.
Inside handoff, that is Saquon Barkley. Broke a tackle, though, for the ball came out. The ball is picked up by Trayvon Walker. The ball is fumbled, and Trayvon is running it back. He's still on his feet. Trayvon at the 20. Trayvon at the 15. Trayvon at the 10. Trayvon is into the end zone. That's going to be a touchdown. Trayvon Walker picked it up and ran it back. And the Jags are in the end zone again.
That's Trayvon Walker, a very, very nice football player. Frank Frangie calling games for Jacksonville Jaguars football. And the Vikings start a 3-game roadie Sunday at noon from Everbank Stadium and against the 2-7 Jags. And here comes the Vox, Jacksonville native Frank Frangie. My man, how are things?
Paul, I'm doing well. How's everything in Minneapolis? We're doing great here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, things are okay. We've lost our kicker and our long snapper in the same week for at least a month. Can't say in all my years of calling football, or maybe for you a decade and change, ever experience a kicker and a long snapper both being lost in the same week?
I haven't. That's a unique situation. We've got a few unique ones ourselves here, Paul, but no, I haven't. And it'll be a fun game. It'll be an interesting game. Vikings obviously off to a great start this season, and us not so much. So hopefully we can get it turned around here.
Now, down Jacksonville way, Frank, it's going to be 83 with 75% humidity Sunday during the game. I happen to know if that heat impacts teams from cooler climates?
You know, I will tell you this. Early in the season, more so. The humidity, even though you read the numbers, it's not going to feel as hot this week as it does. Those early September games, Paul, I think that's a factor. The teams bring in fans. They bring in those shades over the benches. So you play a game Labor Day weekend or the week after Labor Day, mid-September around here, and it's into the 90s and the humidity is unbearable, particularly for teams that don't practice in it. But I think by now, yes, it's hotter than the northern teams are accustomed to, but I don't think enough to make a difference. I see that rear its head in September games mostly, not this far into the season.
Hey, Frank, what has been the highlight of the Jaguars' 30-year history?
I think the golden years, if you will, were those early years. Remember, we started in 95, Paul. 1 year later, the Jags are in the AFC Championship game. That was Mark Brunell and Tony Baselli and Jimmy Smith and that group. 3 years later, they were really good. 99 made the championship game again. Fred Taylor was added to the mix. They beat the Miami Dolphins 62-7. Jimmy Johnson's last game, Dan Marino's last game. That was a really good team. Now, that team lost to the Titans. The Titans barely lost to the Rams in the Super Bowl that year. And that was sort of the golden age. It's been a tough run since then, man. It has been. We've been to an AFC Championship game in 17, but there haven't been a lot of great years around that. So, honestly, those early years of the 30 we've had football here, those early years have really been the magical ones. And I got to be honest, this franchise has been trying ever since to kind of get back to that. It really has. Is
there an all-time face of the franchise, or who is the all-time face of the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise?
I think it's got to be Tony Baselli. I'm biased a little bit, Paul. He's my buddy. He's my broadcast partner. He's one of our two analysts in the broadcast booth. He's in the Hall of Fame. He still lives here. He is a prominent figure here, probably one of the more prominent figures in Jacksonville that's not involved in the political realm. So, yeah, I would say Baselli's the face of the franchise. Now, look, those early guys, Mark Brunell meant so much to this franchise. Jimmy Smith, a receiver who probably ought to be in the Hall of Fame. Fred Taylor, a running back who I think is going to go into the Hall of Fame. Tom Coughlin, who who, as a coach, could go in at some point and really got it all started here are names that everybody here will always remember. But if you had to put, if you're asking for one guy more than anybody else, it would have to be Tony Baselli. Tony Baselli is Mr. Jaguar, if there's such a thing.
Yep. And all right, is Trevor Lawrence the face of the 2024 Jags? And what do you think of his career?
You know, he's in his fourth year, Paul. Yes, Trevor's the guy you most recognize now, and a lot of that book's still left to be written. We're in the early chapters here. Trevor's going to be a really good player. They paid him. He's going to be here a long time. He got the big contract, and he's worthy of the big contract. He's a great kid. He's a great worker. He's a great teammate. He's very well represented here in Jacksonville. We're very well recognized in Jacksonville. So all good. I mean that all good with Trevor. He is good on so many fronts. Having said that, he's got to play better at times, Paul. He's got to play a little better. He made a big mistake at the end of the game last week. He's had some good days and some bad days. We have all seen it with young quarterbacks. Sam Darnold needed to be on how many teams before he sort of found himself with you guys this year? Baker Mayfield's on his third or fourth team. Jameis Winston. Sometimes young quarterbacks, it takes a while. I think Trevor's going to be very, very good, and he's certainly the face of the franchise this year.
Excellent point. This is Frank Frangie.
Fox.
Calls Jacksonville Jaguar games and Vikings at the Jags this Sunday noon KFAN pregame at 10 o'clock. And Frank, how much of an impact has it been for first-round receiver Brian Thomas Jr. losing Christian Kirk for the season?
That has been the storyline. First of all, Brian Thomas Jr. has been fantastic, better than we thought. The Jags picked 17th. They traded back twice to 23rd and got him, and he's been a fantastic rookie. He's really fast. When when you play Tyreek Hill, the defensive coordinators and the defensive backs will all tell you, you don't realize how fast he is until you play, right? You realize how fast he is. When teams play Justin Jefferson, you probably see it every week. People don't realize how complete a receiver he is. Because you can't replicate that in practice. So they don't realize how complete he is until you play him. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is on that track. I'm not saying he's Justin Jefferson yet, but I think another LSU guy, he's going to be really, really good. He is fast and complete, more so than you thought. But yeah, losing Christian Kirk was a dagger. Last year, Paul, the Jaguars were 8-3. They were on their way to a first possession touchdown against the Bengals, and Christian went down for the year, and they were never the same. They lost 5 of their last 6 games. They've been off to a tough start this year. And just as you were hoping they were finding themselves, he goes down again. So that's a big injury for the Jacksonville team, I can promise you.
So our defensive ends, Trayvon Walker, had that scoop and score against Philadelphia, and Josh Hines Allen. Walker and Hines Allen, are they dominating pass rushers game after game after game?
They were last year. They combined for 27.5 sacks last year, Paul. Josh Hines Allen had 17.5, second best in the league. Trayvon had 10. This year, Trayvon's got 7. Josh has 3 or 4. They haven't dominated as much. I don't know that it's all them. The interior has not been great. The defensive tackles have not played great. They've had young secondary members, so guys have gotten open. Quarterbacks haven't had to hold the ball as long. It's not like I'm making excuses. I'm not. That's just my assessment of it. So they're both very good players, but they haven't had quite as much help this year as they had last year. So I think they're 2 really good ends. I think it's a very good pair of ends. By the time the season's over, their numbers will be very good, but probably not 27.5 sacks like they combined for last year.
Now, the running back, Travis Etienne's Jr.'s carries are way down from the last 2 years. Why?
Well, number one, he's been out a few games. He had a shoulder earlier, then he's had a hammy where he didn't play 2 games. He's also a different kind of back. They found Tank Bigsby. Etienne's a good player. He's a first-round draft pick. But Paulie's maybe more of a third-down back, a guy that plays in space a little bit. Tank Bigsby has been their downhill runner, and they haven't had a downhill runner in a while around here. I think he's more of the third and short guy. He's more of the every-down guy. Travis Etienne is still the starter, but they're playing him kind of equal amounts now. And I think Bigsby's more of a traditional downhill running back for this football team, whereas Etienne's more of a guy that plays in space. That's part of it. The other part is he's just been banged up. He's a tough kid now. He's played through a lot of injuries, but he's missed some games, and he's not been the between the tackles runner that Tank Bigsby is. You're going to like Bigsby, Paul. He's number 4. He's a good player now. if you like old school guys like us that have watched a lot of football and remember those downhill runners, you're going to like watching him. You really are.
Time for two more. Despite being hurt of late, Frank, how has former Viking Ezra Cleveland performed since the trade last year?
He's a good player. You know what they like about him, Paul? He can run. I mean, he's a very athletic left guard. Now, he was hurt last week and didn't play. I don't know what his status is for this week, but up until then, he's played. Doug Peterson likes screen passes. He likes the horizontal offense. They like to play in space a little bit. There's a couple plays last year. They'd run a screen pass to Etienne, and Ezra's running downfield with him. So I don't know that he's as physical a guard as some guards. You know, these big right guards are these big physical guys. Ezra's probably not quite as much that. But he's the guy that can run. He's the guy that can get downfield, and he's a good Jaguar. He's a hard worker. He's very well liked around here. They missed him last week. I can tell you that. They're now down to their third left guard because Cooper Hodges, who came in for Ezra, got injured in the game. So they missed it. They missed Ezra Cleveland last week. They really did.
All right, Frank. Lastly,
Fox.
What have been the biggest factors leading to that 2-7 record?
Yeah, I think the defense has been the defense struggling like it has been a real surprise, Paul. I think that, look, this team is coming off back-to-back winning seasons. They won the division, made the final 8 2 years ago. I think the expectations were higher. The defense has really struggled. They are 29th in the league in total defense going into last week's game. They brought in a new coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, and Ryan's tried to get it right. He came over from the Falcons, but it hasn't worked. I saw a stat that was kind of mind-boggling. In 3rd and 15 plays, teams that have made first downs or touchdowns on 3rd and 15, 9 times this year in the NFL, Paul, 9 times teams have converted 3rd and 15. 5 of those have been the Jaguars. The rest of the league is the other 4. They have just not been good on defense, particularly against explosives. They've not been good on 3rd down. So the 29th ranked defense, I think, is the offense has had its problems. They've started slowly. But I think the struggles of the defense, it's what has contributed the most to those 7 losses. And they've lost, the NFL, you lost a lot of close games, man. 5 of those games are decided in the last minute of the game. But a loss is a loss. The defense has to play better for this team to improve. It really does.
My man, I appreciate the time, and I'll see you this Sunday. Okay, Frank?
Look forward to it, Paul. Thanks for having me on. Take care, buddy.
Yep, see you, buddy. That's Frank Frangie from the beautiful state of Florida. He's the 11-year Vox for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Next on the Minnesota Vikings entertainment docket. Next on the 9 to noon entertainment docket includes Vikes Bites, and that's part of the TimberTech What's on Deck set list, which includes PFT. Yeah, we at about 9:40. Chris Finch, head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, joins at 10:30. They're at Chicago tomorrow night. And Bo Hunton Bernsey returns to the 651 Carpets Plus studios. He covers the Gophers for Gopher Illustrated. That team's on a 4-game positive bender. And they plan to stay that way this weekend at Piscataway in New Jersey against Rutgers. Bo Hunting Bernsey at about 11 o'clock. And I'm Paul Allen. Good morning. Nordo produces, and he has the cash thing.
Yeah, 2 men in a junk truck. They want to give you a chance to put $1,000 in your hand with the National Cash Contest. Use the keyword money at KFAN.com. You might win some money with the keyword money at KFAN.com.
Vikes Bites.
Vikes Bites is brought to you by Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed Grass-Fed Beef. You can shop online, thousandhillslifetimegrazed.com, and you can find a box of meat showing up at your doorstep. You can go to your local Coburn's locations, local co-ops as well, and they love them, some maroon and gold. They are proud sponsors of Gopher Athletics. You hear Parker Fox talking about that cool cafeteria and the training table and all that. Well, Thousand Hills is part of the mix with your favorite Gopher athletes.
And best of luck to our friend Parker Fox and his Golden Gophers basketball team.
Oral Roberts, though.
Oral Roberts here, and I believe it's the regular season debut. The exhibitions are done, so best of luck to the man who puts power and power forward, our friend Parker Fox.
Go pack the barn tonight. That'll be awesome. We're going to start here, Vikes Bites. It's a beautiful morning, PA. It's a beautiful morning because we have clarity. We have clarity with who will be kicking and who will be snapping for the special teams unit, PA. Sounds like the TikTok kicker, John Parker Romo, is back in the mix. and Jake McQuaid will be your long snapper. Both signed yesterday as injury replacements. Romo was with the team throughout camp and spent some time previously in XFL action with the San Antonio Brahmas, where he was 7 of 19 in field goal attempts over 10 games. McQuaid, by the way, it's all 6 degrees of Kwesi, and in this case, 6 degrees of Kevin O'Connell. McQuaid might not have the resume of a Don Muehlbach, but he is in his 14th season, PA, and spent most of his career with the Rams, including the 2020 overlap with KO when he was there as the offensive coordinator. So on a morning where we were all hoping to wake up and find clarity, we found some clarity with the kicker and the long snapper. What do you think?
Well, clarity with the long snapper for sure. I mean, we're talking nearly 200 games of snapping here for McQuaid. Started in St. Louis, moved over to Los Angeles, snapped for Dallas for a minute. Think he finished with the Motor City Kitties. So he's been out of the game since last year. But we're talking about 190-ish games of snapping. So getting him up to speed in short order should not be a problem. John Parker Romo hasn't kicked a football in a National Football League regular season game. So he was here for like 4 or 5 months, all the way through the latter stages of training camp, but then he was cut before the preseason games. So this will be all new to him. And having Frank Frangie, the Vikes for the Jags on the previous segment, when I asked him what do you think the biggest reason is that plays into this 2-7 for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I asked it seriously too, because 40% through the game calling depth chart, man, you got first overall picks and drafts on both sides of the ball. You got high first and second round picks just all over the place with these Jacksonville Jaguars. So talent is there. The cohesiveness and meshing it ever since they started losing a bunch of games at the end of the year last year is not there. But the Vikes said the defense has been problematic. Trayvon Walker, first overall pick a few years ago, he's the bomb. He's really, really impressive to watch. He's just so big and fast. But the Vikes said with Walker and Hines Allen and the defense in totality, that's been the problem. They just have not been able to stop people at the right times of games, which means now when you have a kicker for at least 4 of them who never has kicked in a National Football League regular season game, well, you got to take advantage of a defense that is struggling and just put my man on the field for extra points, and or maybe they go for some twos, which I think would be interesting and fantastic if they did that. But that's where we are with the kickers, John Parker Romo and Jake McQuaid.
Vikes Bites! The NFL trade deadline was yesterday. We fielded many texts. We fielded many questions about certain players. The Minnesota Vikings ended up not making any move of any sort, significant or otherwise. And I wanted to bring that up, and I'll get to because I texted you yesterday. I'm like, it's weird. Typically at the deadline, when it was Spielman, I kind of could feel really even weeks in advance whether or not something was going to happen. And part of that, to be honest, we were so financially strapped at times, that really mitigated and kind of limited what the Vikings could do. Now we got a little cash in our pockets, and Kwesi feels like if anybody is going to get an 11th hour deal done that comes out of nowhere with a name that we hadn't talked about, Kwesi's that guy. But I saw this, Matt in New York, text line, 64686. Appreciate all the texts. Pretty frustrating that the Vikings sat back yesterday and did nothing, while Detroit and Washington improved. They have the cap space, they're 6-2 and a pretty open NFC. To me, it signifies they don't see themselves as true contenders, which brings into question why give up a pick for rental left tackle and Robinson. Well, let's talk about the pick for a second. The bridesmaid, never the bride. So kind of the idea of it, at least one Vikings fan frustrated that we didn't see, it didn't have to be Dexter Lawrence, but could it have been somebody? You know what I mean? There's some frustration there.
Well, it was somebody a week ago, a starting left tackle.
Well, and that's one thing that I wanted to get to, and I will, specifically with Cam Robinson. But are we in lockstep here? Wasn't surprised that we didn't see anything pop yesterday afternoon?
No, yeah, we're in lockstep, but it also, I like the way you laid it out. If all of a sudden Grover Stewart was on the team, Well, that wouldn't surprise me either.
Right.
Because that's how the general manager operates. But the general manager also is value-oriented. I mean, we'll just regurgitate this because it still amazes me. They found a way to trade for a left tackle who now has 97 starts, including last game for the Vikings, who is low on the penalty count, plays most of the games, and they got off the hook for like 80% of the salary. I mean, it has boondoggle written all over it, unless there's something with Cam Robinson that nobody really knows about, at least outside of the organization. So that right there has some coup de grace to it. It also is an indicator that the insinuation that with a 6-2 team that made a trade like it made last week is not in it to win at the highest level. I mean, with all due, that's just foolish. The team's 6-2, and that trade they made for Robinson is an indicator that we like what we have, and we don't want to mess it up so much by losing one of the best tackles in the National Football League in Christian Darrisaw. So there's 100% veracity and accuracy that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and his staff were working all day up to the deadline trying to make something happen. Didn't work out. It for whatever the reason, I'm sure things did not work out because there were no trades. So on to Jacksonville.
Yeah, and that's the key too, is I would bet anything that you can say we sat back. And again, I appreciate the text, even though I disagree with maybe the context of it or the idea behind it. But Kwesi was 1,000% making calls. He wasn't sitting there with his feet on the table, just staring at a blank computer screen. That he was efforting. If something fell into a spot that made sense financially, I think they make the move. But they did make a move, PA. They did get Cam Robinson a week ago. And we've already seen him play in his first game. I saw this via ESPN. Mr. Fowler, Jeremy Fowler, Dan Graziano, talking about the deadline deals that were made. Lattimore goes to Washington. Zadarius is now in Detroit, so we know those things. But the question is, who is the best pickup of the deadline? And Fowler says this. Cam Robinson to the Vikings. Minnesota's ready-made offense had a major hole to fill when left tackle Christian Darrisaw, well on his way to the Pro Bowl, suffered a season-ending knee injury. This left the Vikings in a precarious spot since quality left tackles are scarce and coveted. One of the only teams with 3 quality left tackles was Jacksonville, which had just fallen to 2-6 at the time Minnesota consummated the deal with a 4th-round pick. Robinson is an 8-year starter with pedigree. Now the Vikings keep their playoff plan intact with capable play on the left side at a reasonable price. And so I think that's a perfect pairing to go along with that text and with that question is, we actually did make a mountainous move that the general manager should be credited for, where we found for a pick and $2 million, PA, a guy that had started 90-plus games at left tackle in the NFL. He rolls off the bus on a Tuesday, gives up no sacks and just a couple of pressures on a Sunday night. Cam Robinson, whether it's Fowler and Graziano goes on, I like that pick a lot. Robinson is certainly not Darrisaw, but given how difficult it is to find starting caliber linemen at any point in the season, you have to admire the Vikings for getting out there and doing it. And so from their perspective, and a lot of people that have been discussing it, Cam Robinson might be the deal of the deadline.
Yeah, it's tough for me to peg a what's best until they fit into their new teams. They play all the games. You analyze how much said individual helped or hurt compared to the compensation that was given.
Yeah.
I really like what Washington did with Marshawn Lattimore. Lattimore is a super physical, sticky corner who may have some in and out to his game, but that's the situation with New Orleans. That there are a lot down there who, from what I understand, have been playing like that the last year and a half. So the corner situations in the secondary complementing what's a pretty good pass rush, specifically from the inside for Washington with the soon-to-be offensive rookie of the year at quarterback. They have a 2-3 headed running attack that they're really using well. Now, Brian Robinson was out last game. Austin Eckler, the former Charger, he jumped in and he carried the load and he did quite well. Terry McLaurin is a badass. Finally has somebody to throw to him. So I like that Lattimore deal a lot, simply because the target at which to shoot in that division is Philadelphia. And, if you're going to beat Philadelphia in a big spot, you need somebody to cover A.J. Brown. And you need somebody to cover Devontae Smith. And Lattimore is one of those, when he's on his game, when he's healthy and happy. Marshawn's one of those, you got that guy, don't let him catch a pass. And you at least have a better chance than you did before you had him.
Vikes Bites!
Why?
I love that.
Why?
I love that because I was not in the booth, but I could see it vividly from this studio.
Was that last game?
Yeah, that was the second Grenard sack.
Right.
You're waiting there, clock's ticking down, the win is inevitable. Let's just get out alive. We finally get to Flacco. And on the third sack, I mean, you have those moments where
you're so goofy.
You get the description, everything's set up, but then about a real-time second, and everybody listening knew exactly what was going on. Beautiful thing.
Oh, wow. Adam Schefter tweets that Trevor Lawrence's status ahead of the game against the Minnesota Vikings very much in question. He admitted he was beat up and sore after Sunday's loss to the Eagles. And the Jaguars signed quarterback C.J. Beathard.
Oh, Beathard.
Off Miami's practice squad. Wow, the ballyhooed. The ballyhooed is sore. Jeez, maybe they can use John Parker Romo, a quarterback.
Is that the Iowa cat, C.J. Beathard, maybe?
I don't know.
I feel like we've faced Beathard before. My final, I got several, but I want to hit you with this, and this is just a really dumb question, so feel free to tell me it's dumb.
Yeah.
So Cam Robinson was a Jaguar about a week ago. How much can be gleaned from him as the Vikings play the Jaguars now less than 2 weeks? I know they're 2-7. Quarterback might be playing. We might be watching C.J. Beathard against the Flores defense on Sunday. But all of those things considered, they're an NFL team with a right to try and win games. They pushed the Packers to the wire. They were game against the Eagles, even though they needed that Trayvon Walker defensive touchdown to stay in it. But in the end, can Cam Robinson offer, we talked about this during camp, like former guys that are now with new teams, and how much of that can that actually screw up a locker room? Can that screw up a play plan if you lean too hard into those ideas? But with Cam Robinson, he was just there 10 days ago. They can't change everything over the course of 10 days. You know what I mean? Or is that just a dumb idea that Cam could provide some intel to Flores and company ahead of Sunday's game?
Well, I brought it up yesterday, pretty much exactly that way to Kevin O'Connell. C.J. Beathard never has played against the Minnesota Vikings, just in case he goes this weekend. But
that'll be on the depth chart.
Yeah, damn. 32 games? Damn. Okay. C.J. Beathard, though. I brought that up to Kevin O'Connell yesterday because I don't become enamored and or infatuated as much as some others with Shaq Griffin played last year for the Houston Texans and he started 10 games. How much can he help you with C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz?
Yeah.
Because frequently it gets in the way, like you said. They either can't help or it doesn't help. Now, I segue that to with Darnold this year. Well, that was a 10 of 10 with help, because not only did he play in the Kyle Shanahan offense, most importantly, he was the scout quarterback going against the offense in every single practice. He was in every single big spot offensive meeting through the Super Bowl. So yes, that helps a ton, and I believe it did help a ton earlier this year. This one should help a lot. It's unique because Cam Robinson he played for the Jaguars 2 Sundays ago. He played in the game. Now, it's not necessarily how much just paraphrasing O'Connell, because he gave a wonderful answer, but I can't remember what he said. It's not necessarily how much can you help us with how Jacksonville wants to run offense, but with what Trayvon Walker doesn't like when he starts to get himself in trouble. Josh Hines-Allen, these defensive players that you've gone against 8 million reps in practice, that should be it. So like O'Connell was made it sound like Robinson will spend as much, if not more, time with Flores than he will with Kevin O'Connell on this very subject, because there's the recency to it is terrific. And Kevin also brought this up. On the other side, those who have gone against Cam, they know where those bones are buried. So this one has some juicy appeal to it because of the recency.
And that's Vikes Bites, brought to you by Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed Grass-Fed Beef.
Mike Florio with a beefy segment provided by ProFootballTalk.com is around the corner, and you're listening to 9 to noon. It's hashtag Faith Radio at FM 100.3 KFAN. Main man Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com, NBC's Football Night in America, also an author. We'll get to that shortly, because Christmas purchasing season or purchasing gifts for Christmas is right around the corner, and we think we can help you with that with a couple of nice books written by Mike Florio from ProFootballTalk.com, and here he is. Let me ask you a weird one out of the gate, and good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. How are you, Paul?
Doing quite well. Hashtag Faith Radio approaching the midway point. Did you predict Zadarius Smith would be traded in the middle of a Cleveland Browns loss to the Los Angeles Chargers? And I know that's a weird way to frame that question up, but as I was listening and I heard your name driving to US Bank Stadium, it sounded like ProFootballTalk.com made a call middle of a Browns game that Zadarius Smith is not playing right now because he's going to be traded. And good morning.
Well, good morning, Paul. Look, I don't want to bore you or your listeners with details about the process of what I do on Sundays, but since we're on at the end of the day on NBC, I spend basically the period between the conclusion of the pregame shows that feature the patented Sunday splash reports that sometimes are actual reports and sometimes are just fluff packaged as reports, but that's a different issue altogether. I spend a period between the end of the pregame shows and the start of our pregame show at 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Cornfields, chasing certain things, trying to advance the ball on certain issues. So with the trade deadline, I was tasked with the challenge of finding some stuff out. And the one thing that made it to the show on Sunday night, because we got a lot going on in 80 minutes, but the one thing that made it was the Zadarius Smith expectation he would be traded by the Browns to the Lions. And once I became aware of that while I was doing my work during the games, I had to ask myself, okay, do I hold this until we go live between 7 and 8:20 p.m. Eastern, 6 and 7:20 p.m. Cornfields, or do I just put it out there? And it's like, you know what? I'm just putting it out there. And I couched it appropriately. It was the expectation that the trade was going to happen. Obviously, things can change. And sometimes the mere existence of a report that is viewed as prematurely blowing the whistle on something happening can cause people to pull back. It causes tortoise heads to go back into the shells. So I knew that the mere fact that I put it out there could be counterproductive to the actual trade happening. So to answer your question, yes. And it ultimately happened, and there were moments on Monday when I was thinking, I hope this is going to happen, and it did.
I now, in all my years of calling Vikings football, whatever amount of games it is, I now have incurred two things that I never have seen or heard in all 20-some-odd years. One, listening to a football game, a noteworthy player taken out of the game, doesn't come back, ProFootballTalk.com says, well, he's going to be traded to the Lions, and nailed it middle of a Sunday game. And then secondly, for the Vikings, losing a kicker and a long snapper in the same game and for right around a month. I mean, what a zany week it's been, Michael.
Yeah, it has been crazy. And I now challenge you during the next Vikings game to find a way to throw a stray at me the way that Andrew Siciliano, my countryman, threw a stray at me. during the live broadcast. First of all, let me ask you this. Of all the games that were on, what the hell were you doing listening to Chargers-Browns? Were you pining for Jim Harbaugh to have been the head coach of the Vikings?
No.
Are you revealing yourself that you were pro-Harbaugh back when Kevin O'Connell was hired? Is that what you were doing?
No, I get so few opportunities, so many few opportunities to listen to my cohorts. But when we have a Sunday night game, I like to go up and down the dial and listen to them, like either in my garage or the drive to the game or the drive home. And I was just like scanning, and that came on, and I heard your name. And when I heard your name, it captured my attention. I'm like, what? So then I pulled over, took care of business, and here we are right now. But that's why I was listening.
Isn't it funny that when you listen to it, they really thought I was wrong. They didn't even want to touch it. They didn't want to touch it. They're like, don't blame us. Don't blame us.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah, that is super unique, just like losing a long snapper and a kicker into a game, and the kicker had the audacity to miss 2 last game, but he had a bad quad before that.
Well, yeah, that's the problem, and you hope that John Parker Romo, is that right? Did I get those names in the right order? It could be John Romo Parker. It could be Parker John Romo. It could be Romo Parker John. I don't know. I want to make sure I get the name right, but it's a guy that was available for a reason. And I know that there are plenty of guys out there who can kick. The question is how many will kick? How many will deliver? Tyler Bass told me after the 61-yard game winner for Buffalo after he'd had a rough day to cap a rough season, you're only as good as your next kick. So let's see what the next kick is for John Parker Romo. So, and it's important because Reichert had become money.
Yep.
And so you get around the 40, the opponents, easy for him to say 40, and you got 3 points.
Yep.
So that's a problem. That's a problem for an offense that still seems to be trying to find its way. That's a problem.
Well, yeah, and we can't shortchange the long snapper situation. I mean, Andrew DePaula is an all-pro, and multiple years. He's extremely good at what he does. And it's like I said yesterday on the radio. It's all fun and games until you get overbought. Where in 2017, Kevin McDermott separated his shoulder or dislocated it very late in the season. Vikings bring in a long snapper named Jeff Overbaugh. He did okay until the Minneapolis Miracle game. And with like 3 and change to go, he went to the wrong guy. The punt was blocked. The anti-Vikes team marched down and scored with Kamara and took a 21-20 lead. So, I mean, it's all fun and games until the long snapper messes up something. But Jake McQuaid he's been around forever. O'Connell's familiar with him. And, at least he snapped last year. You said with John Parker Romo, like his next kick will be his first kick in the National Football League. He's never kicked in a regular season game.
It's amazing to think there isn't someone out there with NFL experience that they could have brought in. And I don't know. It's been such a crazy week. Did they do a gong show tryout? I don't know. But we'll see. And if he can't get it done, he won't be there for very long, and it'll be someone else. That's just the way it goes. It's the easiest position to change out if the guy isn't getting it done. And with long snappers, you only notice them when they screw up, and they really don't screw up all that often. There aren't many occasions where the snap sails over the punter's head or comes in at his feet. Or remember that weird snap from the playoff game, 2002, I think, Giants, 49ers. It was like a bocce ball roll from Trey Junkins. Is that the guy, Trey Junkins? So you don't see those kinds of crazy developments very often because there are a lot of guys out there who can do the bend over, grab the ball, and fire a two-handed spiral back to the holder or the punter, depending upon whether it's a punt or a field goal.
By the way, elite poll on Trey Junkin. Elite poll with Trey Junkin. I remember it like it was yesterday. Maybe lastly here on kicking.
Blatant downfield interference, too. Remember that?
Yeah.
Blatant.
Yeah, and they called ineligible man down the field or something like that. Right. I remember that. It was that candlestick.
39-38, was that the final score? I don't know. It was a crazy game.
All right, well, Kickergate 2024 comes to a conclusion here. Maybe the Vikings go for more 2-point conversions because, after they score touchdowns, Reichert is so good. Joseph mostly was so good. They so rarely go for 2-point conversions. Maybe this is an opportunity for O'Connell to spread the wings against a defense that's reeling a little bit and go for some twos. What do you think?
Well, you got to have goal line plays that you feel good about. You got to have a call sheet that goes deep enough that you use your goal line plays judiciously. And that's one of the issues that came up Monday night. Everybody wanted Todd Bowles to go for 2 in the game against Kansas City. You got to feel good about whatever that next play is that you're going to use. And they just used 2 plays from the 1. So what are you going to use next? That's the first question. But the circumstances really do drive whether or not you go for 2. I wish teams went for 2 more often. I think the best approach is to be very unpredictable about whether you're going to go for 2, because you want the defense to think they're coming off the field and then they're like, oh, wait a minute, we're staying on the field for one more play after we just gave up a touchdown. I think there's value in that. And we used to see Mike Tomlin do that when they first moved the extra point back where it snapped from the 15, so it's about a 33-yard field goal. And remember, at first, kickers were struggling to make those. They seem to be more consistent now than they were when it first happened, but I'm a big fan of unpredictability in all things football. The more you can keep the opponent on the heels, the more likely you are to keep the opponent on the ropes. And so, yeah, if that's the issue, and it's an analytics thing, what do we expect John Parker Romo to do on extra points? If he struggles at all, you got to start thinking about going for 2.
What Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com.
PFT.
What do you think led the Packers to trading veteran edge Preston Smith?
Well, I can only assume that Lucas Van Ness, first rounder last year, is ready to kind of take over, and it gets into salary versus return. He took a pay cut before the season, so it was already blowing in that direction. He still started the first 9 games. That's what's weird about it. To see a contender sell off a starter at the trade deadline, it tells me they almost got rid of him before the season, and that they haven't seen enough through 9 games to make them think they did the right thing by keeping him around. I think that's it in a nutshell. And the Steelers look at him and say, hey, this is a guy we've always liked. This is a guy we'd like to acquire, like to beef up the rotation, and they go ahead and make that move. So I think it's as simple as that. The Packers just got to the point where they decided it's time to move Van Ness into the starting lineup, and it's time to move on from Preston Smith.
And they have a rookie named Edgerrin Cooper, who they like a lot. And when we saw him at Lambeau, he's a pretty good player. I think that factors into it, too.
And it is when you're talking about a pass rush, it's 7 or 8 guys.
Right.
You want to have that and wear down an offensive line and just basically overwhelm the offensive line and get to the point in the fourth quarter like what we saw the Vikings do, 3 sacks on that drive toward the end of the game after none all game. You just eventually break the camel's back because it's 5 offensive linemen dealing with 7 or 8 defensive linemen and edge rushers the entire game. At a certain point, the offensive linemen are just out of gas.
The Commanders trade for corner Marshawn Lattimore, I think, is fantastic. When Marshawn's engaged, he's as sticky as they get. And New Orleans facing some significant salary cap situations coming up here the next couple of years. They get a 3rd or 4th and a 6th. I think that's a pretty fair deal. What do you think of that for Washington?
Look, I think anytime you're in, number 1, a salary cap crunch, number 2, you've got 2 wins through 9 weeks. There are 9 teams in the NFL that have 2 wins through 9 weeks. I'm surprised there weren't more sellers at the deadline, but the Saints recognize Lattimore's not going to be around for the resurgence. So let's get value for him now and let's move on. And the Commanders fall into the category of team that didn't expect to be in position to grab the brass ring, but here they are. So let's do what we have to do to try to position ourselves, not just to get to the playoffs, but win when we get there. That's going to be the challenge. When they show up at Ford Field or at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, they have to go on the road in the playoffs. Are they going to be able to win with a rookie quarterback who really won't be a rookie by then because he will have played a full season? They need to have players that can help slow down an opposing offense when they get into a single elimination game. And kudos to the Commanders for mortgaging a little bit of the future in order to get the most out of what is an unexpectedly good season.
Are the Chicago Bears entering implosion mode with some things that have transpired of late?
When DJ Moore, who bizarrely walked off the field during a play on Sunday, when he's on 670 to score, and he's asked, has Matt Eberflus, the head coach, lost the locker room? And his answer is, I want to say no. I mean, anything other than hell no, or that's a clown question, or what are you talking about? I mean, that's one of those situations where any response other than an unequivocal, unconditional, loud and clear, no, he hasn't lost the locker room is maybe he has. And when you look at how they've gone from 4-2, they had their bye week. They had that nightmarish collapse on the Hail Mary play where not only did they allow that touchdown to be scored, but the play before they improperly defended, the play that set up the Hail Mary throw, the 13-yard gain that made it easier to throw the pass that won the game. Then it hovered over them all week. They had the Tyreek Stevenson issues. He got demoted. He left practice. One loss became two for the Bears. And now it feels like it's starting to fall apart. And the concern for Eberflus should be this, Paul. Teams don't wake up. Owners don't wake up the day after the regular season finale and say, am I going to keep my coach or am I going to fire my coach? They start thinking about it in November. They start making plans in November. They make decisions in November. And it could be as simple as, let's begin to put a list together of potential candidates for this job in the event we decide to make a change. And it's as simple as, if we make the playoffs, we don't keep the coach. If we make the playoffs, we don't fire the coach. If we miss the playoffs, we do. And Eberflus going forward is on notice. He's got to turn this thing around quickly, or he's going to be in danger, and they go out and maybe get a Ben Johnson to come in and coach Caleb Williams, get a Cliff Kingsbury from Washington to coach Caleb Williams. They need somebody who can join at the hip with the young quarterback and get the most out of him, and that's why I'm a firm believer in offensive coaches. You want to have the coach and the quarterback like Drew Brees and Sean Payton tied together for 15 years. You don't want to have to worry about, hey, we had a really good year. Oh, now the guy who's the main conduit to the quarterback is gone, and we got to find another main conduit to the quarterback. So I think that this is bad for the Bears. It's bad for Eberflus, and it could spark a change and ultimately the embrace of an offensive head coach.
And lastly, Kirk O'Chain's got the best of that Dallas defense. Bet that felt good for the quarterback, don't you think?
Well, why would you say that? Why would he have any specific desire to perform at a high level against former Vikings head coach Mike Zimmer? There's no animosity there. There's no lingering, stuff. No, there's no strays. I read the whole article. The whole Minneapolis Star-Tribune article, when Zimmer went on the record, he took direct shots at Rick Spielman. He blamed the players. He fired a stray at the voice of the Vikings. He didn't say anything about Kirk O'Chain, so they're fine, right?
Yeah,
that's a non-issue.
I would imagine it's an NFC game. It's an NFC game. It's a formidable foe. That's a shiny toy. That definitely had to be the reason he felt good.
2-9 against the Cowboys going into that game. 1-6 with Washington. 1-3 with the Vikings. He lost to Cooper Rush on a Sunday night, and that specific performance might have been, something that drove a real wedge between him and Zim. So I think it was a big win for Cousins, and it's fun to watch what he's doing. And we are 4 weeks and 4 days away from swag surfing and skull clap colliding, and it's not going to work out like peanut butter and chocolate.
All right, my man. With the book Son of Mine and Christmas shopping, what's the best route to learning about that book and the one before it, Father of Mine, potentially for Christmas gifts?
Yeah, you go to Amazon, and they're there for $14.99 each. And let me tell you this, now that the holiday season is here, I've yet to make the push at PFT, but I'm about to. I'm dusting off the Christmas book that I wrote during the holiday season 3 years ago. I posted it chapter by chapter like an advent calendar in 2022. Last year we had it printed up and made available, and I had the proceeds go to charity here locally, a local animal shelter. I'm bringing it back. I'm dropping the price of the ebook. The print edition's still $9.99, but the ebook's only $2.99. It got a great review from Kirkus, which is one of the leading authorities on whether or not books are any good. And usually they throw in some gratuitous negative because it needs to be balanced. There's nothing negative in this review. They love it. And I'm going to give the proceeds that I get from Amazon to charity. And it's a great holiday book. It's got a great message of redemption and reconciliation. And I think we all have some relationship in our lives that we need to be the bigger person and make the first move toward repairing it. If you're not in that situation, God love you. Most of us have some regret, whether it's with someone who's still around or someone who's already gone. And we have to work through that. And part of the goal of this book is to get people to embrace the importance of their families and repair those relationships. And that's available also at Amazon. And this is a great time of year to read it. It lands right at the intersection of It's a Wonderful Life and A Christmas Carol. It's right there. It's the best thing I've ever written. And my only hope is that when I'm dead and I've written 30 of these things, I will eventually write something better. I hope it's not the best thing I've written with still 20 more to write.
Amen with all that. ProFootballTalk.com to learn more about these books, too. All right, call you next week.
See you, Paul.
Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com. Pressure Points provided by Sukup and Sukup.com.